Oh,
See, he doesn't know how to do my job.
I don't
Job
want
security.
that's right.
No trip.
No, I'll try not.
Kind of rusty.
All right.
Limited rusty.
So tonight we're really going to fill in some blanks, okay? And we are in Revelation chapter 2, verse 12. So we're starting to talk about the church in Pergamum. And it says in Revelation chapter 2, verse 12, "To the angel of the church in Pergamum write, these are the words of him who has the sharp, double-edged sword. I know where you live, where Satan has his throne." So Pergamum is what he's saying is where Satan's throne is at. "Yet you remain true to my name. You did not renounce your faith in me, not even in the days of Antipas, my faithful witness, who was put to death in your city where Satan lives." So he's saying to them, you did not denounce, hold on, look back here. You did not renounce your faith in me. So why would they renounce their faith in him? Because of Antipas. So the story of Antipas is kind of an interesting one. Antipas was a prophet of God. And he refused. Now remember where we're at geographically. We are in the heart of Islam, of the Islamic world. Okay? And he refused to worship their gods. He refused to sacrifice to their gods, sacrifice to their idols. And he refused to eat meat that was sacrificed to idols. And he also was keeping others from doing the same. So they were very upset with Antipas. And the priests of Islam went after Antipas, and they decided to kill him. But the way they killed him is so brutal that I have to describe it to you. Not because I like to describe the brutal things to you, but you need to understand why God has such a problem with these people. It's important to understand why God has an issue here. Have any of you heard of a brazen bull? Well, let's go to the next slide if I can get it to go there. This is a brazen bull. And what they would do at that time, see the little door on this bull? They would put a person inside of this bull, alive. And they would start the fire underneath it. And they would cook them. They would kill them by burning them to death. This is how they burned them to death. And inside of the bowl is this long tubular, like a horn. I'll go to the next slide. You can see it there. See that tube with the little horn at the front by the bull's mouth? As the people would scream because of the pain that they were in and dying in this brazen bull, the screams would come out like the bull was roaring. They had it piped such that they wouldn't hear the screams, but they would sound like the bull was roaring. And this is a Baal worship thing, worshiping the god Baal. Baal, they always, if you recall when in Exodus, when the Israelites were traveling in Exodus, they had they had set up bulls to worship. And this is very much a common thing over there, is to worship bulls. Well, this is how they would kill people back. This is how they would also sacrifice people. All right? But that's not the worst of it. This is also Baal required child sacrifices. And this is how they sacrificed the children also. They would put them in this bowl. The other way that they would do it is they had a bull statue that would sit with its arms out like this, and they would hand the children into the statue and they'd slide down into the fire. And it was an incredibly brutal thing that they did. They were killing Christians, they were killing people with this method right here. And it says that when they put Antipas in here, they had already started the fire, and it was blazing hot before they even put him in there. So the second he went in that door, he was already burning. But he didn't die the way they thought he would, because everyone screams. He prayed loudly to God that God would just take his soul, and God took his soul and left his body in the bowl, but his body was not burned in the bowl. They left him in there for a long period of time, and his body wasn't burned. So some Christians took his body after the fire went out and went and buried him, because usually what was left is just bones. That's all that would be left after this. This is one of the most cruel ways of killing someone, is this brazen bowl that they had that was used. And the picture that you saw before is a brazen bowl. There's many of these in museums over there, but this is one that was in a museum. And you can see, if you could read the sign, it basically describes the process that I just explained to you, what happens with the bowl. And that's why they have the fire underneath and the hot coals and then the door on the back of the bowl. But that's how they killed Antipas. So if you can imagine yourself as a Christian, a follower of Christ, and you're over in the Islamic part of the world, and they just did this to Antipas, what would be going through your mind? You would be in fear, right? You'd be thinking, boy, is that going to happen to us? And that's why Jesus says here, you did not renounce your faith in me, not even in the days of Antipas, because of what they did to him. And that's why he says, my faithful witness, who was put to death in your city where Satan lives. So God is likening the way that they're treating people and the things that they're doing here to Satan himself. He says Satan lives in an area that they do things like this. This is the kind of things they do where Satan lives. And then it says, there are some among you who hold to the teaching of Balaam, who taught Balak to entice the Israelites to sin, so that they ate food sacrificed to idols and committed sexual immorality. Immorality. I always say that word wrong. So the story of Balaam is also a story out of Numbers. It's in Numbers chapter 22 to 24. And Balaam was a prophet, but he was not a godly prophet. He was a prophet that he would do blessings for people. He would bless people, and he would also curse people. But he couldn't bless anyone or curse anyone unless God allowed him to do so. So Balak was the king of the Moabites. And do you recall when we talked about Exodus, where the Israelites camped out on the Jordan River, and they were getting ready to cross over to take the city? Well, when they were camped out, Balak was so afraid of the Israelites because of what God was allowing them to do, that he went to Balaam, and he wanted Balaam to curse the Israelites and put a curse on them so they could not cross the river. And Balaam, and he offered him money to do so. And God told Balaam, no, you're not allowed to curse them. But Balak kept at him and kept bothering him and offering him more and more money, to where Balaam finally said, yes, I will go. So Balaam got on his donkey and he started riding towards the Israelites. Well, the angel of the Lord showed up with a flaming sword in front of the donkey. And the donkey saw the angel of the Lord there and veered off into a field. Well, Balaam beat the donkey for veering off into the field. Well, then the angel of the Lord went out in the field and put walls on both sides. So the donkey couldn't go anywhere. So the donkey came forward because Balaam was beating the donkey. So the donkey, if you can envision this, the donkey walking between these walls. Now the angel of the Lord shows up with a sword again. And the donkey veered off to one side and crushed his foot against the wall. So Balaam beat the donkey again. And this is going somewhere, so hang with me, okay? So finally, the donkey got up and started walking again, and the angel of the Lord showed up in front of him again, and the donkey had nowhere to go, so he just laid down. And Balaam beat the donkey again. Now put yourself in Balaam's shoes here for a minute. The donkey looked up at Balaam and said, "Why are you beating me?" The donkey said this. Said, "Why are you beating me?" Balaam said, "You are not going where I want you to, and you are just a terrible animal." And the donkey said, "Don't I always give you rides and take you where you want to go, and I always watch out for the best of you?" And right then, Balaam was able to see the angel of the Lord in front of him. And the angel of the Lord said, and this is kind of an image of this, the angel of the Lord said to him, "Had you kept coming forward, I was going to kill you." He was going to kill Balaam. Because Balaam was told by the Lord not to go to the Israelites, but he was going. But he said, "I was going to kill you, and your donkey saved your life," all 3 times. So Balaam turned around, said, "Okay, I understand, I'm not supposed to go." He turned around and he went back. But Balaam, an important part of this is Balaam taught Balak how to entice the Israelites to sin. So instead of putting a curse on them, he showed them how to sacrifice to idols. He enticed them with sexual desires of women, primarily. And Balaam taught Balak how to entice the Israelites. So do you remember when we talked about the Nicolaitans last week? The Nicolaitans, they controlled people just by sheer brute power. That's how they took people over. The Balaam is teaching them how more subtly to control people through their sinful desires. And it says in Numbers, and I've got this up here, so you don't have to turn to it. In Numbers 31, it says, "They were the ones who followed Balaam's advice and enticed the Israelites to be unfaithful to the Lord in the Peor incident, so that a plague struck the Lord's people." So Balaam taught them taught the Moabites how to entice the Israelites to sin through their sexual desires. So even though God told him not to put a curse on them, he sort of still did, because he taught them how to make them sin, how to entice them into sin. And this is important because, when we think of God, we always think of God as loving, and God wouldn't punish people like that, or when someone dies, I hear it so many times that everyone goes to heaven and God wouldn't send people to hell and God wouldn't punish people. Well, in 2 Peter, we get a different picture of God that I just want to read to you. So just hang with me for 1 minute here. In 2 Peter chapter 2, it says...
You don't have the words, sir, up on the board?
No, I'm just going to read it to you. It's kind of long, so I just thought I would read it to you.
I know, I'm like, I'm
Okay.
looking at the order like it
It says, for if God did not spare angels when they sinned, but sent them to hell, putting them in chains of darkness to be held for judgment. If he did not spare the ancient world when he brought the flood on its ungodly people, but protected Noah, a preacher of righteousness, and 7 others, if he condemned the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah by burning them to ashes, and made them an example of what is going to happen to the ungodly, and if he rescued Lot, a righteous man, who was distressed by the depraved conduct of the lawless. For that righteous man living among them day after day was tormented in his righteous soul by the lawless deeds he saw and heard. If this is so, then the Lord knows how to rescue the godly from trials, to hold the unrighteous for punishment on the day of judgment. This is especially true for those who follow the corrupt desire of the flesh and despise authority. So, in 2 Peter, it's telling us, he will judge the wicked. So, and it's basically saying, if he would do this to the angels, then he would certainly do it to us. If he would judge them, he's going to judge us. If he would judge the whole world except for one righteous person in his family, Noah, and flood the entire earth and kill everyone, then he would also judge us. So it gives you a little bit different picture of God, because we think of God as love, and God is love. God is the definition of love. but he's also just, and he has to punish sin. And that's sometimes we forget that's important. And then it says later on in 2 Peter, it says, with eyes full of adultery, they never stop sinning. They seduce the unstable. They are experts in greed. So he's really narrowing this down to sexual sins. He's saying this is bad. And you can see this in Revelation. We're seeing this where the Israelites and the people were pulled away from their belief in God and what they were following to follow their sexual, immoral desires. So let's go back to Revelation.
15.
Okay, thank you. And then it says, likewise, you also have those who hold to the teaching of the Nicolaitans, which is rule by force, control people by force, and if they don't listen to you, you kill them. Repent, therefore, otherwise I will soon come to you and will fight against them with the sword of my mouth. So that's what he's talking about in 2 Peter, his judgment. He's talking about no one is going to be held unaccountable for their actions at that time. Then it says, whoever has the ears, let them hear what the Spirit says to the churches. To the one who is victorious, I will give some of the hidden manna. Hidden manna is a portion of Jesus Christ. That's the hidden manna. It's the blessings through Christ and how Christ feeds us and feeds our soul. I will also give that person a white stone with a new name written on it, known only to the one who receives it. So when he gets to Thyatira, this is where it gets... That was interesting. So remember the brazen bowl, because that's important to remember. To the angel in the church of Thyatira write, these are the words of the Son of God, whose eyes are like blazing fire, and whose feet are like burnished bronze. I know your deeds, your love and your faith, your service and perseverance, and that you are now doing more than you did at first. So they're growing as a church. They're trying to be more godly. They're trying to do better things. But then he says, nevertheless, I have this against you. You tolerate that woman Jezebel, who calls herself a prophet. Now Jezebel is an interesting character in the Bible, because Jezebel married King Ahab. And King Ahab was the king of Judah at the time that he married Jezebel. And Jezebel enticed him, and pay very close attention to this, enticed Ahab to sin, to follow his sexual desires, and to worship Baal. All right? Part of worshiping Baal is this. This is what I was describing before, where they had the bronze cow, the bronze bull, and they would take their firstborn, their sons and their daughters, up on this altar, and they would lay the child into the hands of this bull, and they would fall down into the fire and die. They would sacrifice their children. And it talks about this in Psalm. I'll read it to you because you can't see the whole thing up there. But it says, they served, in Psalm 106, it says, they served their idols and were ensnared by them. They sacrificed to demons their own sons and daughters, shedding innocent blood, the blood of their own sons and daughters, whom they sacrificed to the idols of Canaan, desecrating the land with bloodshed. They defiled themselves by their actions, became adulterers by their conduct. So they are killing their own children as a sacrifice to Baal. And they are sacrificing their own flesh and blood to Baal. And Jezebel is a follower of this. So by...
Question?
Yes.
So by doing that, what do they get? Do they get to go to heaven? Why would they sacrifice their child?
Baal was considered the god of dew and of rain.
Like D-E-W?
D-E-W, okay. And rain and fertility of crops.
Okay.
Well, if you can imagine the part of the world we're talking about Turkey here, which is a desert. Water is incredibly crucial to them. So they had created this god through Baal, and this is how they worshipped it. This is how they brought rain, or they thought they brought rain, and so forth.
Okay.
And so Jezebel brought this into the Israel camp by marrying King Ahab. And now Ahab started to worship Baal, and he even built a temple to Baal. I'll show you the temple in a minute, because it's still there, okay? Built a temple to Baal. So are you starting to get the picture why God is disgusted by these people? And why God is moving in Revelation to say, don't follow these people. Stop doing these things. So in 1 Kings, I'll just read this to you. I gave you part of this already. So we can kind of skip to where it says on 32 on the slide there. He set up an altar for Baal in the temple of Baal that he built in Samaria. Ahab also made an Asherah pole and did more to arouse the anger of the Lord, the God of Israel, than did all the kings of Israel before him. So he angered God tremendously by his actions. He fell to the lust, because God told Ahab not to marry this woman, but he did it anyway. He said he not only considered it trivial to commit the sins of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, but he also married Jezebel and began to serve Baal and worship him. God is not happy about this. You've got the king of Judah worshiping Baal and following following this idol. So what did Jezebel actually do? If you look at the last thing there in Kings, while Jezebel was killing off the Lord's prophets, she killed off all of the Lord's prophets at that time, except one. And it's, I think I've got a slide.
Sorry, another question.
Yep. No, go ahead.
What's the pole? What's the?
An Asherah pole.
Yeah,
That's just
familiar, but I can't remember.
that's a pole that they would worship to. It's all idols. It's all idol worship and worshiping these things. Okay. So the temple. Let's see. Let me see if I can jump over this. Maybe I could get this over here. All right. So you can see where we're at. If you recall on the map, our 7 churches are up here, where I'm pointing right now. That's where our 7 churches are. This is Israel right here. And this is Syria, the country Syria. And this is where the temple of Baal is at. This is where they set up the temple. And the temple looked before it was destroyed. It looked like this. It was destroyed by ISIS in 2015.
Oh, that recent.
Yeah, 2015, they destroyed the temple. But this is what the temple looked like. The temple that Ahab set up for Baal.
Are they still using it?
No, this it was in ruins anyway. It was already ruined. But they destroyed. I don't know if they destroyed it on purpose or by accident. I'm not sure. But anyway, it got destroyed. But that's an important point to remember, is that it was destroyed. Get this off of here. I'm not as good at this as Joey is, so bear with me. And this is what Baal looks like. This is their statue of Baal.
I like his hat.
Yeah, just a tall hat. But it's just an idol. What it is it's an idol that they worship. Baal came into being. Do you remember I've showed you the picture of Dagon several times? He's the fish god. It's the god that has the fish tail. This Baal came on the scene after Dagon. All right? So he inherited the powers of Dagon, and now they worship Baal instead, which is worshiping golden calves and things like that. But it's important to understand about Jezebel. And I'm going to jump over there for just a minute. So in 1 Kings 18 and 20, so Jezebel killed off all of the prophets except one. The prophet she did not kill off was Elijah. He was the prophet. You've probably heard of Elijah before. This is where Elijah is coming onto the scene. Elijah was left. And Elijah went, and it says in 1 Kings 18, and I'm actually in verse 21. Elijah went before the people and said, "How long will you waver between two opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal is God, follow him." See, they were starting to straddle the fence. They were worshiping Baal. But then they said, but you know what? If God is real, we should worship him too. So they were worshiping God, and they were worshiping Baal, because they thought if they worship both gods and kind of straddle the fence, then you're covered. You're safe, right? Right? So that's what they were doing. They were worshiping two gods. And Elijah came and said, you need to decide who you're going to worship, because the Lord God won't stand for this. And he basically said, and then said, but the people said nothing. And then in verse 22, then Elijah said to them, I am the only one of the Lord's prophets left, but Baal has 450 prophets. One of them was Balaam, right? Get 2 bulls for us. Let Baal's prophets choose one for themselves, and let them cut it into pieces. Now these are physical bulls, so they're going to sacrifice. Cut it into pieces and put it on the wood, but not set fire to it. I will prepare the other bull and put it on the wood, but not set fire to it. Then you call on the name of your God, and I will call on the name of my Lord, of the Lord. The God who answers by fire, he is God. Then all the people said, what you say is good. Elijah said to the prophets of Baal, so this is God's moment of saying, I am going to prove that Baal is false and I am real. I'm going to prove it to you here. So it says, Elijah said to the prophets of Baal, choose one of the bulls and prepare it first, since there are so many of you. Call on the name of your God, but do not light the fire. So they took the bull given them and prepared it. Then they called in the name of Baal from morning till noon. Baal, answer us, they shouted. But there was no response. No one answered. And they danced around the altar they had made. At noon, Elijah began to taunt them. He says, shout louder, he said. Surely he is a god. Perhaps he is deep in thought or busy or traveling. Maybe he is sleeping and must be awakened. So they shouted louder and slashed themselves with swords and spears, as was their custom, until their blood flowed. Midday passed, and they continued their frantic prophesying until the time of the evening sacrifice. But there was no response. No one answered. No one paid attention. Then Elijah said to all the people, come here to me. They came to him, and he prepared the altar of the Lord. So theirs was all in vain. Baal never showed up. Their altar never started on fire. Their bull never burned. So he says, come here to me. They came to him, and he repaired the altar of the Lord, which had been torn down. Elijah took 12 stones, one for each of the tribes descended from Jacob, to whom the word of the Lord had come, saying, your name shall be Israel. With the stones he built an altar in the name of the Lord, and he dug a trench around it large enough to hold 2 seahs are. 2 seahs of seed, 24 pounds of seed. He arranged the wood, cut the bull into pieces, and laid it on the wood. Then he said, fill 4 jars with water and pour it on the altar. Pour it on the altar with the wood. Douse it all. Make it all wet. Do it again, he said, and they did it again. Do it a 3rd time, he ordered, and they did it a 3rd time. The water ran down the altar and even filled the trench. So this is a soaking wet offering now. Okay? At the time of the sacrifice, the prophet Elijah stepped forward and prayed, Lord, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known today that you are God in Israel, and that I am your servant, and have done all these things at your command. Answer me, Lord, answer me, so these people will know that you are Lord, that you, Lord, are God, and that you are turning their hearts back again. Then the fire of the Lord fell and burned up the sacrifice, the wood, the stones, and the soil, and also licked up the water in the trench. When all the people saw this, they fell prostrate and cried, the Lord, he is God. The Lord, he is God. So Elijah proved to them that Baal was false, and Baal was not a god, and they should follow the Lord. Then Elijah commanded them, listen to this part, Seize the prophets of Baal. Don't let anyone get away. They seized them, and Elijah had them brought down to the Kishon Valley and slaughtered there. So they killed all the prophets of Baal. So talk about a brutal time, right? But see, this is God saying, I am God. And God tells us in his word, I am God and I am a jealous God. You are not. What's our first commandment? No other gods before me, right? This is what he's talking about. No other gods before him. And the reason I have 2 Kings up there, in chapter 9, verse 30. When Jezebel heard about it, she put on eye makeup. Now Jezebel was not happy that Elijah just killed all their prophets. And she was going after Elijah. But God has something for her. God decided that it was Jezebel's time to leave this earth also. And it says, when Jezebel heard about it, she put on eye makeup, arranged her hair, and looked out of a window. So she knew that they were coming for her. So what does she do? She gets all fancy and does her hair and puts on fancy clothes, right? Because you're going to meet your maker, I guess you might as well look good. As Jehu entered the gate, she asked, have you come in peace, you Zimri, you murderer of your master? This is what he did. And this is in verse 32. He looked up at the window and called out, who is on my side? Who? 2 or 3 eunuchs looked down at him. Throw her down, Jehu said. So they threw her down, and some of her blood spattered the wall and the horses as they trampled her underfoot. Jehu went in and ate and drank. Take care of that cursed woman, he said, and bury her, for she was a king's daughter. But when they went out to bury her, they found nothing except her skull, her feet, and her hands. Because God said, you will be eaten by dogs. And she was eaten by dogs. So that's what happened to Jezebel. And why did it happen? Because she misled the Jewish people. She misled the Israelites, God's chosen people, and there's a penalty for that. So this is what, so let's go back to Revelation then. So what this does is it gives us a really good picture of the wrath of God, right? Because God does have a wrath. God is love, yes, and God loves us, and he loves us to the ends of the earth. But he also is just, and he will punish sins. And that's what he's talking about here.
Verse 20.
Verse 20. Thank you.
You read the first couple.
All right. Yeah, so in verse 20, says, nevertheless, I have this against you. You tolerate that woman Jezebel, who calls herself a prophet. By her teaching, she misleads my servants into sexual immorality and the eating of food sacrificed to idols. I have given her time to repent for her immorality, but she is unwilling. Does that give you a new meaning to that now? Because she was misleading them. So I will cast her on a bed of suffering, and I will make those who commit adultery with her suffer intensely, unless they repent of her ways. I will strike her children dead. Then all the churches will know that I am he who searches hearts and minds, and I will repay each of you according to your deeds. Now I say to the rest of you in Thyatira, to you who do not hold to her teaching. See, there was still an element of the church that was not believing in what Jezebel was teaching, and they were following God. And he says, to you who do not hold her teaching and have not learned Satan's so-called deep secrets, and this is Jesus talking, okay? I will not impose any other burden on you except to hold on to what you have until I come. Just keep the faith. Stay strong in your faith and keep the faith. Then it says, to the one who is victorious and does my will to the end, I will give authority over the nations. That one will rule them with an iron scepter and will dash them to pieces like pottery, just as I have received authority from my Father. I will also give that one the morning star. Who's the morning star? Jesus Christ. Whoever has ears, let them hear what the Spirit says to the churches. Now I want to pause here for a minute, because we wonder, how does this story apply to us today as a church? Right? Well, I want to show you a few things. This is the gate to the temple, and I should probably tip this down just a little bit. This is the gate to the temple that Ahab built for Baal. Notice the arch, the main gate in the middle. Notice the arch and the missing blocks at the top and the formation of that. Put that in your mind for a minute. Ingrain that in your mind. Because this is what our wonderful country did when ISIS tore down the temple. Okay? This is in Syria. All right? Well, in 2018, this is New York City. Okay? This is to the temple of Baal. All right? This is in Times Square, right by Times Square. They put up a temporary, that's not there anymore, but in 2016 to 2018, they made this temporary wall because ISIS destroyed their temple. So now we're putting this up in our country. This is a monument to Baal. This is not something that we should be proud of in this country, nor should we ever display it. But we didn't just leave it in New York City. This is in Washington, D.C. Notice the arch? Same arch. It's the gateway arch to the Temple of Baal that they put up in Washington, D.C. also. Now, after what you just heard that God did to those who went against him in Israel, I don't think we should be embracing this kind of stuff as a country. Now, this is not there anymore. This was a temporary structure, but it also made its way to London, England, and it made its way all around the world to show that we somehow support the fact that ISIS tore down this temple that really, by all means, should have been tore down. If there's anything good that ISIS ever did, it was destroy their temple. Okay? Seriously. I mean, for what that temple stood for, and the fact that it stood as a monument for a God other than the Lord God, we should not be celebrating this in our country. But we did. Now, thankfully, these were temporary structures.
Kind of appropriate, though.
Yeah. Now, let me share something with you here. And this is controversial, and this is not political in any way. But they sacrificed their children, right? They haven't killed anywhere near as many children as we've killed in this country, if you think about it. So when you look at the number of children that have been killed in this country due to, well, let's just say it's due to abortion, they haven't killed anywhere near as many children as we've killed. So the fact that we would put, and the thing is, I'm not even sure that our leaders knew what they were doing when they put this up. I don't know if they understood what this actually stood for. But when you talk about the things that Baal stood for, he stood for the sacrificing of children. He stood for sexual immorality. What better place to put it? We are the country.
And anti-God.
Huh? And anti-God.
It's the main problem.
And anti-God. I mean, but this is we think that this is so far away from us and it's thousands of miles away over in a desert somewhere. But this came to us. All right?
Who brought it over?
I don't even know who brought it over. I suppose I could research it and find out. There's probably some organization that sponsored it and built this temporary structure. But if you look at this, this is an exact replica. If you so take a close look at this arch right here, and then look at the arch right here. It's an exact replica of that middle arch that they put up. And we did it to somehow support Syria because this temple was destroyed. I'm not even sure we understood what that arch was even to and where this actually leads to.
Was this in the news?
Yeah. If you
Because I don't remember.
do a Google search for Baal Arch, you'll find all kinds of news stories about it. It was in the Wall Street Journal. That's how I found it. I did a search for it to see where it was at because I wanted to show you on the map where it was. And this all popped up. New York City, Washington. But see, that's how God works. He shows you stuff that you weren't really looking for, but then you find it. Okay? And that's where this came from. Now, there's something else that's important here. This, if I can pop back to the map. Maybe I can't find that. Give me a minute, I'm going to search for it.
So probably the taxpayers paid for putting it there.
Oh, I bet we did somehow. Yeah, I bet we did pay for it.
Somehow. That's why we're getting into what
All right,
shape we are.
so this temple, this is the temple. This is what it looked like before ISIS destroyed it, okay? And this is where you would go through that gate and make your way to this with all the pillars and stuff that are knocked down now and through the ruins. This is in Palmyra, Syria. Palmyra. And that's spelled Palmyra. All right? So we think of this as existing only so far away from us in the world. Well, I don't know how much you guys know about Mormonism and the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, but they believe in polygamy. Well, they did believe in polygamy until it was outlawed, and they probably still practice it quietly. But they believed that when Jesus Christ ascended, that he came back down and spoke to Joseph Smith in the United States. Okay? And they practice some of the same things as Baal. They don't do children sacrifices, of course, but they did practice polygamy, which is a sexual sin and leads to all other kinds of sins, okay? Well, the place that they believe, well, I don't think they just believe it, this is what it's taught in their religion, that Joseph Smith, when Jesus Christ came to him in the United States, he came to him in New York, okay? Because they built a monument to Joseph Smith in New York. And just remember, when it comes to God, there's no such thing as coincidence. Things happen for a reason, and things are the way they are for a reason. This is in Palmyra. I always want to pronounce it wrong. Palmyra, Syria. Okay? This is the Mormon temple, and guess where it is at? Palmyra, New York. Now, how could that be? This is located in Palmyra, New York. Now, I do not think that there's a such thing as coincidence here. I think there's a reason it's called Palmyra. I think that they practice a lot of the same things that Baal practiced. So if we think that Baal's religion died with the Nicolaitans or with whoever practiced it, with Jezebel when she was killed, if we think that died, we are sadly mistaken, because it is very much alive in our world still. And it is very much there. So when you look at all of the ways that people are enticed into sin through sexuality, think about, well, you can think about it, I don't have to list all of it to you. Think about how people are enticed to sin through sexual immorality. It's still alive and well. So this warning that he's giving to these churches in Revelation, he is warning the current modern day church too. He's warning us too. Stay away from this stuff. I am not happy. If God is the same God now as he was way back then, so if he didn't like it then, and he went to such lengths and extremes back then, the same thing can happen now. He's the same God. He's the same one who's in control. All I can say is all of this stuff with Jezebel and all that happened before Jesus Christ. So thank God he sent Jesus Christ to us as our salvation and our way out of this. Because we would be trapped in the same thing that these churches were trapped into thousands of years ago. We'd be trapped in the same stuff. So thank God he sent Jesus Christ to die on that cross to pay the penalty for our sins. So we don't have to. So we have a way to salvation because we need it. We need that way to salvation just as much as they did back then. And thank God we have it.